Hello, friends, and welcome to the Cinemondo podcast with Kathy, Mark, Burk,
and a special guest.
Our special guest today, Shaheed.
Yes, Shaheed Qaasim is with us today, and thank you so much for coming on. We love doing these interviews with people in the business, and especially we love doing editors, and because it's such an interesting craft. And I think a lot of people say the TV show or a movie is made or broken by the editor. And so thanks very much for coming and spending a couple of minutes with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Right. And so my first question is always like, how, I'm sure you have a love for TV and movies and entertainment. How did you get into the business originally?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. Thank you for asking. I started in college. I think like many of us, we studied filmmaking. I had a communications degree with an emphasis of television and film. So I always knew I wanted to be in the movie industry. Right. And and then in college, I ended up with an internship. I worked as a set PA on an old time movie called She's All That. That was done many years ago.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure.
That is, intern is film school, man. That's where you learn, right?
Oh, yeah. It was fascinating for me because I felt like in the 6 months of, being on a set, you basically learn about all the information that you learned in 4 years of school.
If you keep your eyes open, you can learn so much.
It's such a practical knowledge. And, and that kind of led me to another TV show called Arliss, an old time television show where that's where, HBO. And I kind of just like most of my career kind of traveled through the HBO ranks. I did Arliss. Then I did another show in the early 2000s called Carnival, in which started on set, and then I transitioned into visual effects, which was fantastic.
That's fun.
Yeah, worked with a guy named Dave Altino, who now is the owner of a company called Fuse Effects, which is really huge in town.
Major company,
and then from there, I worked on the Big Love pilot in visual effects, and then I moved on to Deadwood, another fantastic HBO show, David Milch, and that introduced me to editorial. Yeah, and that was my first assistant editing job, was on Deadwood, and working with David Milch was just such an amazing opportunity, and it's one of the most precious opportunities for myself and for my career, because that was when I learned the power of storytelling as an editor.
Right.
Yeah, because as an editor, you kind of, especially coming from visual effects, you really think editing is about how well you are in the keys. You think about the acting. And it really has nothing to do with that. It's really about like how strong are you as a storyteller, and how do you use this tool that you have, the Avid, in order to tell that story. And these days with the evolving technology, I personally feel like editing is one of the most powerful creative tools we have in filmmaking today.
A lot of people don't realize that, but editing, like you said, is storytelling. It's like music, you put it together the way music is put together. I think the way it builds and builds, and there's a verse, chorus, verse, chorus, there's a bridge. It's similar in some ways. I mean, the way you perceive it while you're editing. I've done a bunch of editing, not full on editing, but editing my own little short films and stuff. So I kind of try my best to understand it, and it really is the unknown hero. I think at its best, editing is invisible. It's one of those things, sadly, that doesn't get noticed. People don't go, wow, that show is so well edited. They'll say, wow, his acting was so great. They focus on the actor. But the editor a lot of times has so much more, like you said, storytelling responsibility.
That's right.
You read these,
And I appreciate you bringing us in and having such respect for editing, because editing is an invisible art form. And good editing ultimately takes away from itself, because if you are completely immersed in this story and
you want it to be invisible.
Yeah.
Like special effects, like visual effects. You don't want somebody to say, "Oh, look, that's a special effect." You want it to blend and have somebody say, "Oh, look, that actually happened."
And it's like the greatest compliment any visual effects supervisor can receive is for someone to turn to them and be like, "Oh, there was visual effects in that?"
Right. I get that all the time. That's the world I work in, and people will watch shows and I'll say, "Man, I was all over that show," and they're like, "I didn't see anything," and I'm like, "Okay, I guess."
You're like, "Job well done." Yeah, I like that.
How did you get Shaheed? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say, Shaheed. So you were in visual effects. How did you sort of transition into editing? Did you tell them I'm interested in doing that, or I had some experience that was always sort of the ultimate goal, the career move to get into editing from visual effects? How did that transition happen?
That's a great question. I've always been strongly passionate in storytelling, and early in my career, I thought one of the reasons I was working on set was I was thinking I was going to take this pathway to becoming a director, which is still an aspiration of mine, and I've been shooting some things of my own, etc. But I kind of found, I went into visual effects initially because all of the gaggy kind of sci-fi stuff is really cool for me. It's just something I've always been interested in. I know I'm like a young dorky child at heart.
You're our people.
Welcome into the family.
But I try
dorky nerds that like stuff.
I'm the dorky nerd that tries to secretly hang on to the cool persona, even though I'm not really fooling anybody.
Exactly.
I gave that up a while ago.
Is anyone buying this? I don't think so.
You see, when you're African American, some people just automatically think you're cool, so you don't have to do a whole lot. You can just be quiet, and they're like, "See that cool guy in the corner over there? The quiet one?
Quiet, mysterious."
So I was always into visual effects, all the cool, gaggy kind of stuff. But I really found that the power is in storytelling, and that's what led me to editorial. And that's what I saw in editorial almost immediately, because I was fortunate enough to work on a great show with such a brilliant writer, exec producer David Milch. And he's also like a professor. And I remember he would sit there and he was actually, working with Milch was kind of one of the most fascinating things, and one of the most fascinating people I had worked with in my career, because I had never seen anyone kind of, and as a writer, he kind of just plays it off of his head. I've seen him sit here and write scenes laying on the ground and just dictating all the characters just straight away. And you see someone typing aggressive madly, and that ends up being the script that you use. And then, but what was so fascinating about the way he would work is he would kind of get inside the characters. He would he would say all the characters in their lines verbally. And then he would completely flip his brain into this analytical brain from his creative side. And then he would criticize all the dialogue as if he wasn't the person who had written it.
Right.
That's great.
That's a good skill. Yeah,
that is. That's really amazing.
Because as artists, we get so tied into our work.
Yeah.
I know one of the skills that's difficult for editors is sometimes you have a problem you're trying to solve, or something you're trying to land that maybe wasn't, you don't have the best elements for. And eventually you kind of might feel like you get there because you worked so hard on something.
Yeah.
And then sometimes that objective viewpoint is I don't understand anything that you're doing here. But you spend so much time on it. I know as artists, we spend so much time on something that you start to almost believe your own lies.
You fall in love with it, and you're like, I can't change that now.
It's your baby.
I've invested so much into this idea. Yeah.
Subjectivity is hard as an artist.
So it's so hard. And it was fascinating how David Milch could just immediately flip his mind, and he would just be this professor criticizing his own work and be like, that's not going to work. And you're like, but you're the one who said
that. That's very cool.
Yeah, that's great.
So to be able to be on that show where you get to see that creativity, and obviously it was a great show and a great experience, but that sort of led you into, if I'm looking at your IMDb Pro and I see, Battlestar Galactica, you were assistant editor for a few.
That's amazing.
Geeky and fun. 12 Miles of Bad Blood, Men in Trees, Hung, was a bigger show. yeah, HBO, and then Modern Family, which
Yeah.
is was a huge hit. So you
Yeah.
were
I did
really
a lot
sort
of
of in
the
with the big productions.
I did a lot of the key art for Modern Family.
That's right.
So I saw that, like, I saw, I'm like, oh, we both worked on the same show.
That's so cool. I love that.
Technically.
I love that
Right.
about this town. What was
Yeah.
what was some of the was there anything specifically, Kathy, that you really loved about working on that show?
Well, I mean, technically, since I was doing the posters and the key art, it was kind of post, but we would have to, because they're shooting the show and then we're just doing the poster while they're shooting, but I'm not actively involved in the shooting or anything, but we do get to go to the set and do the photo shoot. But I think the best one was the coolest experience was we were just on a nice, beautiful setup, like a Vanity Fair looking group shot. And then they brought the baby in to be part. This is when the little girl was a baby in like the first quarter of the series. And then the baby started crying. And so everybody's like, everybody started crying. So everybody started going, like the whole cast starts pretending to cry. And it was just for like probably 3 shots, because then Eric Stone Street was like, this isn't cool, man. So then they take the baby away, and then that ended up being the key art. Like if you look for posters from Modern Family, you'll see where they're all crying and they're like laying around the group. It's hilarious. So that was a fun one because it just sort of happened out of the blue. So that was spin it. So that was kind of fun.
That is one of the magical parts
about
a
great show.
Filmmaking. Yeah, and it reminds me of editing too, where that is sometimes most of the time it is extremely well crafted, but every once in a while you kind of find something almost inadvertently or accidentally in it, and it's really feels rewarding when that ends up being the gold.
It's interesting. So you did a lot of drama, and then to go to is comedy easier or harder to work on? Like, what's the different challenges between the genres, or is there one? I don't even know.
That is a great question. In my experience, for someone who has worked very hard to do both comedy and drama and sci-fi and horror, I guess I actually try to do a lot of the genres, because I feel like as an editor, you actually continue to increase your bag of tools by hitting every genre. And but I would say comedy is the genre I think is the hardest, because it's sometimes difficult to land a joke. Drama has a lot of cinematic elements to it, so the visuals I find to be more important in drama, while comedy, you can look at plenty of shows like Always Sunny didn't have like the highest production value in the world, but was hilarious.
Part of its charm.
Part of its
timing and
but timing is so important, and you in just even something as simple as a couple of frames. And I don't know if you've heard this from editors before, but it is crazy how 2 frames can be the difference between landing a joke and not landing a joke. Wow. And how sometimes you can find that, and it's all about rhythm. And I have a dance background also. I do swing dancing as a hobby. And oh, sweet, you guys didn't YouTube me. That's excellent.
We will now.
We're going to include pulling up their phone right now. Oh, don't include any clips. Please do not include any clips. But just like you're saying, how editors almost like orchestras or orchestrators of footage and rhythm. It is something that I learned, I think, through having a dance background. I think that's been something that's also been useful for me as an editor, is to really kind of understand timing and rhythm. And it's something that's a powerful tool that we all use in edit.
It is to me. I think of editing and I think of music. I always think about some of my favorite things that I love the editing with is things like the Kubrick films and things like that. And I know that they edited with music, and the music, sometimes the edits will correspond to what you're hearing in the music, in the edit and all that. It's almost like a music video in a way that you and you feel like this. There's this. It's hard to put into words, isn't it? Like I'm trying to put words to something that you can't. But I totally understand that. I just can't verbalize what it is about editing, because there's some things in editing where, like you said, it's a 2 frame that can make it or break it. And I work in special effects kind of realms, so I do a lot of editing with what I do. I do a lot of playback and a lot of graphics that play back. So I have to be concerned about storytelling as well, like how fast a graphic, an animation ramps up, and it has to be intense, and the people are reacting to what I did, and they're, it has to work with the intensity and the suspense of the scene. And sometimes I'll cut things to music, and and I don't know why, because the music's not going to be on there when I'm done, but I want to have that feel of what I'm doing, to have this pow, 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 kind of punk rock energy if it needs it, or whatever.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it sounds like, Burk, at the end of the day, it sounds like it's about the emotions.
It is.
And
Yeah, you're telling the story, like you said. And that's the primary function of every aspect of film production. Is you must serve the story. You must tell the story. And you can't get locked into some, like you were talking about before too, you can't get locked into something because you think it's cool. If it doesn't serve the story, you're like, there's so many times when I'll do something that I think this is so awesome looking, but it doesn't have anything to do with with the drama that's happening in this scene. It'll take you out of that and put you into my little idea about this cool shape or whatever. It's like, no, leave it out. Just tell the story.
Yeah. The story always rules, and then, like, the faster we learn that lesson as filmmakers and storytellers, the more powerful our work becomes. And I think it's one of the things that was so powerful of Pokerface, and why so many people really got attracted to that show, was how strong the stories were, how well the scripts were, how much care we put into the shows. And as an editor, with this new mystery telling format, how important it was for us to provide so much information about what these little murders were in the beginning part of the show. So then when Natasha enters in the second act, we already have enough information. So when she's kind of unraveling these mysteries, we can just be with this great character, Charlie Cale, and just be on the ride with her and enjoy it.
What I loved about...
let's talk about that, because that's the stall, right? It's the second or third episode.
Third episode of the stall,
Good. It's one of my favorite ones.
I think I love everything about Pokerface, because first of all, it harkens. I remember watching Columbo in those 70s
big
mystery
Columbo fan here
theaters.
too.
And so obviously everything about it sort of reminds me of that, even the typeface and the font and the way the show starts. But also that when I first started watching that, it was like, oh, okay, we're seeing the murder happen, and then we have to, then Natasha comes in, Charlie Cale comes in, and we with her try to figure out, watch her try to figure out the mystery. And of course she knows bullshit right away, because that's a wonderful tool that she has. So it's just a beautiful show, and I watched all 10 really quickly, and I loved all of them, but 3 was fantastic. And also the one you did, the one with Nick Nolte, right? Well, you're muted.
Oh got muted.
There he is.
There we go. Yeah. You also did the episode with Nick Nolte, right?
Yeah, thank you. Episode 8. That's the Orpheus Syndrome with Nick Nolte. Yeah, that was an episode that Natasha Lyonne wrote, directed, and also starred in.
Yes.
Amazing.
And it's an impressive one too. It's really like, it felt a little bit different than the other ones in an interesting way. It had a different sort of vibe to it, maybe more of a horror vibe than some of the other ones. And of course, Nick Nolte is great at playing sort of the gravelly sort of, special effects guy, the sort of the Douglas Trumbull of, and it's just, I really loved that. So both episodes that you edited were really first rate. So congratulations on that.
Oh, thank
I'm
you
sure
so
it's
much.
because of you also. Then that's part of it. But I'm only being half joking, because you had to take all of this information and give it a flair and make it make sense, and all these complex moving parts, because this is not an easy show to follow, really. I mean, there's a lot. You see the crime, but you're not given all the information. So you're having to very, very cleverly put things together so we can see and not see. So how much in this kind of a show, and you could, even after this question, jump off where you want, but the 2 directors, you have 2 different directors you're working with. Like, how much input from them do you get, or they kind of go, just do your thing, and you get to put all that stuff together?
That's a great question, especially for those who don't really understand the process. Generally, what happens in Hollywood?
Please tell us about it.
How does that happen?
How does this magic happen?
It's almost like this is a podcast about filmmaking.
Yeah.
Surprise!
Surprise!
You're on a filmmaking podcast.
And go. No. Yes. Yeah. It's to answer your question. Yeah, it is. There's to talk about the process. Here we go. The story goes like this. So to talk about the process in the edit, first thing that happens is as they're shooting each day, you get the following day's footage. So if they shoot on Monday, you get dailies that come in on Tuesday of the last day's work. So as an editor, we're constantly cutting these scenes. So we're working these kind of individual vacuums, and you're trying to make the best scene possible generally. And then you get all the scenes together, and then you build the show, and then you oftentimes are like, oh, whatever decisions I made earlier no longer apply once I see kind of the whole shape of the way the show's playing out. And then you go in there and kind of really tool and grind out all those little moments. And on Pokerface, one of the important things is we actually see what the murder is prior to our main character, Charlie Cale, having experience. And one of the kind of joys of the show is to find out where Charlie was when this murder happened.
Yes.
Yeah.
Backtrack. Yeah.
So for us, it is, as editors, it is so important for us to set the platform, provide all the information about the murder, which is what we do in the first act. But more importantly, since we have all these great guest stars on the show, is to set up who these characters are. We actually, since Charlie Cale doesn't enter into Act 2, it gives us a very great landscape in order for us to work very hard to get the audience to buy into who these characters are in their world and who they are. And a show like this it's such a team effort. I mean, sure, everything at the end of the day runs through the Avid, runs through editing, and we kind of make choices on performance and style and shot and stuff like that. But on a show like this, you need a total team effort to get this level of quality, from production design to DP to writers, directors, actors. I'm sure I'm missing a million others who contribute, but it's such a massive contribution on a show like this. And there were so many talented artists that you, as an editor, kind of end up with very nice ingredients for you to kind of craft out.
Yeah.
Hopefully this very delicious, mysterious, suspenseful meal.
Yeah, here's a chef. They're just bringing you all the ingredients, right?
I mean, it's interesting because I kind of think about editing like that sometimes, because at the end of the day, and actually this is a quote from, I won't say, I can't quote anyone else. This is a Shaheed quote. How about that? But at the end of the day, you have to know how to put it together. And it's interesting because you can have all the best ingredients in the world, and if you don't know how to put those things together, I mean, you could have the finest ingredients in the world, but if you gave it to a 5-year-old to make a meal, it might not be the tastiest meal, as if you gave it to someone who kind of understands how the flavors come together.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for sure. So how much who gives you the most oversight or like the final say on the cut you're making? I don't know how much involvement like the director has, or is it the producers like Ryan Johnson? Does he come in and have a say? Does Natasha come in and go, let me see this, move this or move that? Like, how much is your final say and how much is like someone, else contributing?
Are they over your shoulder watching as you're editing? Or
I mean, ultimately, you do end up there. You have and they circle like hawks.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, they're all very nice people on this.
We love them all.
No, they're so nice on this show. I mean, actually, I will say this: Ryan Johnson has a knack for spotting talent, but he also has a great instinct of finding really kind people. And
good.
That's good.
That's everything.
You know how this town is. That is not always your experience, and it is a special experience working with him, because not only are you working with people that are talented, you're working with people who are committed, and you're working with people who are kind. The work environment is. I mean, I think Modern Family might have been the only other time I've had that level of like kindness and talent combination all swirled together into one meal. But to answer your question, sorry, Kathy, to get on the tangent.
No, I love the tangents. Keep going.
Good. We recommend.
Yeah.
You get your first pass first. So that's the first thing you do is your editor's cut. So you basically get the opportunity without any supervision, without any birds circling over you. You get to decide creatively what you feel like is most powerful story to be told. Right. You are somewhat limited in your editor's cut because you are generally need to represent the script. I heard a very important quote, which was, "The script is innocent until proven guilty." So
Right.
so your job is to essentially deliver the scripted show. The edit is always the final version of the script. So oftentimes in Hollywood, the final version of the show is not exactly what was on the page, but
Yeah.
but your first pass is to deliver what's on the page in the strongest fashion that you can. And then the next step is in television is the directors come in and you know, and they were there. So and they had their own vision. And you know, as an editor, we serve a very important role because we're extremely objective. We don't really know what your intent was or what you were kind of thinking about when you're writing it, like out in the coffee shop, you know, late at night, or we just respond to footage and performance. And it's either playing or it's not playing, or we do our best to make it play. And you know, so then later when directors come in, they kind of have these, you get to see more of the intention, and they add a lot to the cut. And you know, and you work the cut with the director, and then after that, Ryan comes in, and Ryan is just such a powerful filmmaker, and he has such a great vision and such a library of knowledge in his head. And you know, and and he's very efficient. You know, one of the things that's great about Pokerface is we move through the stories extremely efficiently. You know, we don't really spend a lot of time on anything that's not serving the story.
Right.
And you have to be very disciplined, and you almost have to be ruthless with your own work to operate in that kind of way. But at the end of the day, it serves the project the best.
Because of that show, because it's an hour show, and the first third you said is the murder and the crime, and then you get Natasha coming in like at the 15 or 20 minute mark, and then there's a whole other the last 40 minutes is this compact, like she's got to figure out the murder, but we also have all the characters. There's so much. There's not a wasted second in the show. There really isn't, and you really feel like, boy, you're really moving through this quick, and it all sort of fits together. So when I think about editing and putting this show together in particular, it seems so like, wow, there's so much to put in here, and to make it work fast and clean and have it make sense, you know, and that's really hard to do. It's not a drama where it's two people talking and it's sort of laconic. This is more like there's a lot happening, and it all has to work and make sense and have a certain believability too, you know? And that's hard.
And what's hard about it, Mark, is, you know, the way we write poker, the way they write Pokerface, or the way it's written, is there's so many intricate pieces that will play later. And for us as editors, that's one of the things that we do is we have to, when we're talking about like rhythm and timing, we have to really be mindful of rhythm and timing, so we can kind of spend more time on one shot versus another. So we're communicating to the audience subconsciously what's going to be important later, even though at the time they're just watching these beautiful imagery. We're
without
kind of setting
too,
up a pattern. To say,
without being too much.
Without being too on the nose, because and then that's what's kind of tricky about Pokerface is because of all of these intricate details, everything has to work. You know, not every TV show is like that, where every scene, every moment has to work. But here, you almost need every single beat, because every single beat plays into the other one.
Exactly.
And we have a combination of having the audience be behind us and having the audience be ahead. One of the things that's
true.
And it's one of the things you pay attention to in filmmaking. You oftentimes don't want the audience to be ahead of you because we're bored. Like, you know, if we're like, okay, this is going to happen.
I know how this is going.
Come on. We've all been there. Come on, y'all.
Yeah, I know what you're going to do. Just do it.
Get it over with.
But we're playing with having the audience be ahead and then having them be behind. And Orpheus Syndrome is a really great example of that, where, you know, we start the episode off immediately with a death, which is what we generally don't do in Pokerface. And we see this married couple arguing, and then we see the husband just jump off and do a nosedive right into the rocks, which deforms his face. Then we have the next scene where we meet the movie star Nick Nolte, where Laura, played by Cherry Jones, tells her that she had this argument with her husband, and all she wants to do is just get this like mannequin of his head, so she can kind of see her old husband again, to kind of repent from this. And then the head gets delivered. We do a cool Texas. This is all in the first act. We do a little cool Texas switch or whatever they call it, where we go from the mannequin to the actual flashback of the husband again, where we find out that he found some piece of information that incriminated her to a point where he was going to call the police and she might be in jail. And then that she poisons his tea. And not only did we find that he didn't necessarily nosedive, he committed suicide in order to deform his face so she can get access to these files. So while we're giving the audience information, we're constantly holding on to these little hooks that that so that there would be more information revealed, or where we've provided the audience with a lot of information, so then they have enough so we could just sit back and just enjoy it when Charlie Cale is receiving this information. So we're constantly playing with the audience being ahead and behind.
That is complicated. That's interesting.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
There's a great aspect of mysteries where you have to where the audience is either ahead or behind, but there's another aspect of storytelling with mysteries where you give the audience this feeling of, wow, I'm really clever because I've figured this out.
Yeah.
And there's just like you're saying, if you're going to hold the camera on something, and it's like, I worked on a show one time where there was a letter opener thing, and it had a very distinct handle on it, and we had to make it so that this thing was very distinct in a certain specific way. And the camera just sort of goes, there's an angle where you see the guy and you see his letter opener there. Your attention is drawn to it only because it's unusual, not because the camera is pushing in on it or it's like right in front of his face. It's like way over here, and it was just enough. Like, let's move it a little bit further away, because we want it to be something that maybe clever viewers will look at it and that's weird. That's a cool looking thing, because then later you see it sticking out of somebody, and then it gives the audience the opportunity to say, that's that thing that he had on his desk. And maybe the person they're watching it with is like, I didn't see it. Like, yeah, it's the thing on his desk. And then later you find out, yeah, it's the thing from his desk. And you're like, see?
Gotcha.
And you feel cool. You feel really smart because you solved that gives the viewer the opportunity to solve the murder,
Yeah. And that is, I find that magic, Burk, is what Rian Johnson is a master of. He has really, I think he really understands how satisfying those beats are for audiences. Yeah. But then you have to, in order to accomplish that, you have to be so precise in your planning and so precise in your storytelling that you can set up these little moments. And just like you're saying, the execution, that's when execution becomes extremely important in those types of shows.
Yeah. Well,
you can't be too blunt about it. You have to be careful with some reveals and things like that. It's because otherwise you're insulting. I mean, if you were to put that knife I was talking about right here, like right there in the shot, it's like you're insulting your audience. You're like, okay, I think my audience is really stupid, so I'm going to have to put this prop right in front of the camera so that they really see it, and I think people are like, oh, okay, that's going to be the murder weapon.
And that probably affects like how you edit too, because you have to decide, how long do I hold the beat on this thing that's going to be used later without it seeming to like, aha, she put the knife down. That means she's going to need it later. That
right.
Kind of, like stupid moment, where you're like, oh yeah, there she put the knife down. Why didn't you do that?
A lot of that.
And those things change over time, because as us as editors, we are also mindful that audiences become more and more sophisticated with the gags as we
sure. Absolutely.
And in a show like that, people are looking for those clues,
Right.
Do you ever have to tell that this is like, just my presumption, do you ever tell a director, hey, I need this shot, can you go do this? Or do you just have to deal with what they give you? How much of a back and forth is there? Or is it mostly just wishful thinking that, wow, I really wish I had this shot?
It depends on the environment. In this environment, there was back and forth. And I think back and forth is important. I think it's actually miraculous that anything is good. It's actually
yeah, that's what I always say about it too.
When you see filmmaking, it's like, how is this going to work?
Yeah.
Some colleagues of mine, we're just talking about that. Like, so much actually has to go well in order to have a good product. I mean, you can put, like we were saying before, you can, so as we've all seen, you can put all the best ingredients together for a movie, and sometimes that doesn't equal a good movie.
Right.
So as it relates to kind of crafting it out, you do that back and forth. I think in real good environments, that back and forth is present, where there's enough trust between director and editor, where you can reach out and say, because everyone doesn't know when you're there, or sometimes a new idea pops up and you can say like, oh, hey, can we grab an insert of this, or can we get a reaction? Is there something we could steal because we could really land a moment, now that the cut's together. And so that back and forth does happen depending on the project that you're on. Sometimes
you're saying this very carefully, like, not everyone does it this way.
Not everyone does this, and but also not everyone can, Kathy. So it's not.
That's true. It's very accelerated pace on TV, especially. I mean, so fast.
It's so fast, and
you know what's one. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just Kathy said it was so fast, and I was just having an emotional reaction to it. So. Let me just
the accelerated late night that you have to put in.
It's ridiculous. I get that too. It's like people, I get a phone call. It's like, oh, here's what we want. And they're just kind of casually describing it. It's like, we need this, this, and this, and this. And I'm like, oh, okay, let me get my notepad. Okay, got it. Okay, this, and this. And they're like, yeah, we're going to be shooting in about 20 minutes. So I'm like, what?
20 minutes.
Yeah, we're gonna be rolling in more like 15 minutes if you could go ahead and just but yeah, no, it is it is a fast business. Television.
You said you're I'm sorry. I'm gonna say, so you
squeeze 3 hours of work into 15 minutes.
Let's do it. Why
but not? We can do it. That's the thing. That's why we still work in this business, is because we can do that.
It's definitely
and without showing fear, don't show fear. It's like, okay, I'll have it to you in 14 minutes.
Exactly.
Shaheed, are you working on anything currently? I mean, what's anything coming up? Or
a strike going on right now.
The strike is going on right now. I am. I guess I'm currently still employed. Not sure how much longer that is going to last. But I'm working on one of the Walking Dead new spinoffs.
Shut up! I'm working on all the art for all of the spinoffs. So tell me which one.
Oh, really? Oh, you're in the spinoff fan club, Kathy.
Is it Dead City? Is it Daryl Dixon, or is it Michonne and Rick?
I am on the Rick and Michonne show.
Yay!
Yes.
Cool. It looks so good. Oh my god, that's major.
So stay tuned, everyone. We don't, who knows what's going to happen with the strike. I'm sure AMC's posted some dates. I would, look for the fans out there. I would look out for those. It's going to be a great series. Really excited. I had worked in that camp before. Once again, extremely talented, extremely smart, extremely kind people. You always have to give a shout out to that, because that's not always the case.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a definite quality that you must aspire to in film production, television production, is kindness. I've heard you mention that several times, and that's so vital, because I remember when I started out in the business, you may have this experience too. People were not kind. People were ripping you off, and people were treating you like dirt, and people were treating all, a certain level of production like dirt, and it was awful. And you think, okay, is this the entertainment industry? Then is this what it is? And then you start getting better reputation, you get and then you start getting into those better jobs, with the better people, and you start thinking, okay, there are kind people, creative, powerful people who have who want to tell the story. They're not there just to get your paycheck and to rip you off. And it's a different thing when you get to that point, when you can say that I work with kind people in the entertainment industry. That's a very nice, good thing to be able to say.
And when Rick and Michonne comes out, we can have you back on. You can talk about
that would be fun.
Kind of my favorite.
We love horror here. I mean, like
Yeah.
Kathy and I. So, like, have you done horror editing before? Like, I haven't looked at like any kind of like
Yeah, I
short
mean,
films. Or...
I guess Walking Dead. There was a tiny short film. I don't even believe it's on IMDb. It was years ago. But yeah, horror. I kind of dabble into a lot of different genres. Just like I was saying before, I just think it allows you to kind of continue to increase your bag of skills as an editor.
Right.
It surprises me how fast editors can be, I guess, typecasted, if there's such a
Right.
thing for editors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have friends who do comedy that don't even get looks for drama, who could very well direct drama, and I got the advice very early to actually work really hard to make sure that I'm balancing comedy and drama, so you don't get pigeonholed in that kind of way, because
Smart.
I am someone who's able to do both, and you utilize both. And then when you get on a show like Pokerface, for example, all of those tool sets need to be available to you, because Ryan Johnson is just like a filmmaker. He's just like a straight filmmaker. He's not going to like pigeonhole or box himself in. And it was so beautiful for us as editors, because it really just kind of gave us an opportunity to utilize our skill sets creatively in order to just create the best story. And we kind of treated each one of those stories as their own independent films.
And you were like the perfect man for the job, because you can do comedy, you can do drama, you've done some horror, and that show does all of that. It's like, it's comedic, but it's also scary, and it's also, a drama, and it's also horror, little elements of horror in there. There's murder, and like, it really does take someone who can juggle all those different, disciplines, because you might miss the humor if you're just trying to get the horror aspect, so.
Absolutely. And there was a time when I on a dramatic show where I was working with a producer, and we kind of had a very difficult problem in the cut that we needed to solve. And I remember going, "Oh, this is a gag we could do. It's a comedy gag, and I know we're doing horror, but I believe that this will work for the type of story we need to tell." And I remember at the time the producer was kind of like, "I don't know." And then I was like, "Well, let me just show it to you."
Oh, that's so smart.
Yeah, and the next day he came in, and like I showed this like little like sequence, and I remember he was like, "Oh, that totally worked." And
that's awesome.
It was because of my comedy background that happened.
I bring it.
That's amazing. Hey, Shaheed, now you mentioned earlier that you'd like directing or working on some of your own stuff. Is that sort of the next evolution, or you want to is getting behind the camera and directing? Is that something you'd like to do, in the future or now?
Absolutely, Mark. And being someone who's been in cutting rooms since the early 2000s, you learn a lot. And I think a lot of lessons in filmmaking are learned in the editing room, in the cutting room. And I think going from, actually, Ryan Johnson told me this. He mentioned to me that because he was an editor too, as well as a director. And he felt like directing is a natural progression from editing, And,
I could see that, because you'll know what you need. Like you're in the inside seeing the background already coming and what you're going to need to edit. That seems like a really smart way to start directing, actually.
Yeah, because knowing how to put the pieces together is extremely powerful, not only in post-production but in production too, because as we know, things don't always go as to plan. And when you understand the end game, it empowers you to pivot in the right direction. So but for myself, I've just been like, I've been shooting some things on my own. I won't talk about those yet because they're all in.
You talk to us when you're done.
Yeah.
Okay. But I'm also constantly educating myself, because there are levels to it, and as an editor, you can see the levels with certain directors. Some directors, their bag, I like to call it, which is really like their skill sets. It's so deep, and it's so good, and it's so precise, and it's so emotional, and it's so creative, and it has such a point of view And then you work with directors, and this is no fault to the directors, but maybe it's experience, maybe it's time, maybe whatever it is. But and you kind of, as maybe not as strong. And as an editor who's been around cutting rooms as long as I have really seen the levels to this. So for me, it's really important for me to continue to grow and develop my skills, because I would want to be that director that another editor would look at and be like, "Whoa,
yeah,
yeah."
That's smart. That's smart.
And on that note, we like to always ask, what movies inspired you to be in filmmaking in the industry? Like, do you have a film that went, I want to do this?
Well, you all are going to, I'm sure you all are, all three of you are going to love that The Godfather and Chinatown are just like the two that I mean, obviously The Godfather is just like such a genius piece of work.
Just filmmaking.
And I watch Chinatown over and over and over. I study it. It's one of there's certain films that I feel like I listen to like an album, like, there's albums that I've listened to over and over, and there's movies that I watch over and over for the same reason. I feel like it washes over me, and I feel like I hear something new in the song or whatever. And The Godfather is so full of things to notice and see, and every time you do both of the first two, you watch them, and there's moments where I say, wow, the reason that works is, and you start analyzing, and it gives you such a great resource for film analysis, because there's so much in there to study. And Chinatown is the same way, just the storytelling, there's a few sequences in there where you hear the sound of something before you see it, like this scratching weird sound. And then he goes around the corner. It's the guy scratching the dead guy's name off the door. Or you hear that whoop, whoop, whoop. And he looks around, and there's the guy wiping off a car. There's something about that. And you start analyzing that in the context of the story and the final line of dialogue. And that movie is so, I don't know. I could go on and on about that.
Those are great movies. So
great choices.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I love that you're,
and as far as an editor,
and I connected with you giving that example of something very simple in editing as a pre-lap, but how in an ingenious movie with a genius filmmaker takes something that's so simple and makes it like so powerful and so integral to the storytelling. And that's what's so beautiful about those films is they're basic film concepts that were done in such a powerful way that we continue to carry all of those things throughout the next 100 years, 200 years of making films. But here are the ones that did it the best, and we're gonna pay attention to that. And I also think that was one of the brilliant parts for me in my experience working with Ryan Johnson and this team was they're such film buffs too that they are inserting it, and it's a television show, but they're inserting so much filmmaking into it that
I care about it.
See, I love movie fans. I love how much we love it. I love that you made it your job, and that we're all kind of in the industry in whatever way we can be, because we're just loving it, and that just brings everybody together. And I feel like when we all talk, it feels like we're all old friends, because it's all the same dialogue and
there's a connection there,
the passion and the feelings, and I just love that. So I'm so glad that you joined us today to talk.
I have one more question.
Okay.
Kathy sounds like she's wrapping it up.
I am wrapping it up because I have to go to work. I still have to work.
Oh, okay. Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
I always like to ask editors, because there's one anecdote that I'm sure you're aware of, and it sort of saved it was an example of where an editor saved the day. They became the hero and created something that became iconic, but it was done because of like almost like a panic, like what are we going to do? And the editor came up with this idea that not only saved the scene but became an iconic image. And it's in the original Star Wars movie, the first Star Wars film, when the Sand People are attacking, and there's this great scene where he has the gun and he goes like that. And everybody, and in later films, that's what the Sandmen do now. They do that with their guns. We've seen that in all the shows. But actually, the shot was the only shot the editor had was just one move. It was just that, and it cut.
They just did it up and down, up and down.
And so then when they did the cutaway from Luke on the ground to the, the triumphant Sandman, it was just like that, and then cut away. It wasn't long enough, and they didn't have footage, and they couldn't go back out to Tunisia with the costumes. So the editor said, what if we do that forward backward cycle thing and just go there, back, there, back, there,
Let's
back.
go.
And so they did that. They did, and if you look at that scene, you can tell it's a back and forth TikTok kind of a thing, and it's like, that's iconic now. And that editor everybody was like, yes, you saved that shot.
The editor's a hero.
Have you ever done that? Have you ever done that where you had
Saved
the
a
people in
scene.
the editing room? They were like, yes, you saved that shot.
Just say yes.
Short answer,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah, I know
All the
you
time.
have, because I think all editors do that,
Yeah,
and
they
nobody
do.
knows.
Yeah, you're talking about a secret of editing, and to me, I would say all good editors do that.
Yeah.
Because editing actually isn't that difficult if everything is shot really well. Like if something is shot perfectly and all the pieces line up
You
perfectly,
got all your
like,
coverage. Yeah.
I think anyone could probably put it together who knows how to use the software. But really, in my opinion, the true value of editing and what they pay us money to do is to do exactly what you just described right there, Burk. Is when you're in a problem and you have a story issue or solution, how can you take these little pieces of film and put them together in a way, juxtapose them in a way that's going to continue to fix this hole in the story while continuing to have this and propel the story with this and continue to have an emotional response for the audience, and in that case be iconic.
Yeah. Great answer. Great answer.
Oh my God. Great way. It's a hero telling us.
Yeah. Well,
because you are.
Well, editors are the heroes of the film.
They
they're like the last, they're the gate that the film comes out of, exactly. And it's like, here, it's released unto the world. Yeah. It's like,
that was a great scene.
Wow. That's such an interesting thing. I mean,
that was great.
Stuff that I don't think about, but Shaheed, it was so nice to have you with us, and thanks for taking the time out, and we'd love to have you on back. Again, when you want to talk about movies or other TV shows, so we can just have a conversation about that, because we'd love to have you on. You're one of us, so we appreciate it.
Yeah, whenever you want to come back. Do you want to come back on the show?
Yeah, this was amazing. Absolutely.
Okay, now we have it on tape now, so you're contractually obligated
to be on
evidence. We have you on tape.
Yes.
Thank you.
He said he would come back.
and we're fans of your work. And when you reached out, we're like, okay, what's he done? It's like, oh my God, he did Pokerface. Oh my God, he did this. Modern Man. What? So it was
now
very,
we can watch
very
these
cool.
shows and like, I know that guy in the credits.
Great, Shaheed. Well, just stick with us for a second while we do the closeout. Okay,
you could do the outro, and then we'll chat again after it's over. So
I may have to bail, but I love talking to you, and we'll definitely do it again.
Okay, thank you all so much.
Thanks for joining us.